जो चर्च में एक ट्रेडिशनल इंडियन दिया यानी नीलाविलक्कू जलाते हैं, बिल्कुल वैसे ही जैसे मंदिरों में होता है। बहुत कूल है ना?
हाँ मतलब कमाल है।
ये एक छोटा सा एग्जाम्पल है कि इंडिया में कल्चर कितना ब्यूटीफुली ब्लेंड होता है। आज हम ऐसी ही अमेजिंग चीजों के बारे में एक सुपर डिटेल डिस्कशन करने वाले हैं।
डेफिनेटली।
और हाँ, इससे पहले कि हम इस नॉलेज एडवेंचर पे निकलें, एक सेकंड लगेगा, फटाफट सब्सक्राइब बटन दबा दो, नोटिफिकेशन बेल को ऑन कर लो ताकि तुम कुछ मिस ना करो, और एक कमेंट छोड़ दो। योर सपोर्ट मीन्स द वर्ल्ड।
बिल्कुल। Today's session is all about understanding India's complex and, beautiful social fabric. हमारा learning map एकदम clear है दोस्त. We are going to tackle this topic through a series of important questions, one by one.
Okay, let's hear it.
First, we'll start with the unique syncretic culture of the Syro-Malabar Christians.
Got it?
Then, we move to the constitutional safeguards for linguistic minorities in India.
Important topic.
After that, we'll take a deep dive into the constitutional rights of religious minorities. इसमें हम 2021 का एक specific question देखेंगे.
Okay.
Next, we'll analyze a 2020 question on the social and political problems faced by these minorities.
Achha, so provisions and then problems. Makes sense.
We'll circle back to linguistic minorities for a short note-style analysis. And finally, we'll re-examine the problems of religious minorities through a 2015 question, giving it a fresh perspective.
Wow, that's a packed session.
तो चलो, let's dive in. Okay, so हमारा पहला topic है write a short note on Syro-Malabar Christians, 10M.
Right.
And the broad micro-theme for this is a community exemplifying religious syncretism and unique social stratification within the Indian context. Let's break this down. The Syro-Malabar Christians, जिन्हें St. Thomas Christians भी कहते हैं, are one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. And I mean oldest. Their origin traces back to the 1st century AD in Kerala.
1st century? That's incredible.
It is. ये बहुत important point है. They follow the East Syriac rite of worship, which is an ancient tradition. But here's the twist. They are in full communion with the Roman Catholic Church. This makes them a fascinating case of cultural and religious synthesis.
इसका एक रियल लाइफ एग्जांपल सोचो. इमेजिन तुम एक साइरो मालाबार चर्च में जाते हो. वहां तुम्हें क्रॉस के साथ साथ एक ब्यूटीफुल ट्रेडिशनल इंडियन नीलाविलक्कू यानी अ ब्रॉन्ज ऑयल लैंप जलता हुआ दिखेगा.
Exactly.
ये एक परफेक्ट माइक्रो स्टोरी है ऑफ कल्चरल ब्लेंडिंग. It's not just about faith. It's about how faith adapts and, embraces the local culture. So that's cool, na?
Exactly. Ab, for scoring maximum marks, answer structure is everything. Let's start with the introduction. शुरुआत में उनकी हिस्ट्री यानी द 1st century AD, origin और उनके ड्यूअल नेचर ईस्ट सीरियक राइट प्लस रोमन कैथोलिक कम्युनियन को मेंशन करना इज एब्सोल्युटली की.
Right.
ये एग्जामिनर को इंस्टेंटली बताता है कि यू नो द कोर कॉन्सेप्ट.
This is a great starting point, but here's my first question to you. How can a student make this introduction truly impactful and not just a statement of facts?
Excellent question. Quick answer, start with their ancient lineage and frame them as a unique bridge between Indian culture and Christian theology.
A bridge? I like that.
For instance, you could write, the Syro-Malabar Christians represent one of the world's oldest Christian communities, uniquely positioned at the confluence of Indian cultural traditions and Christian theological principles, making them a living example of India's ancient pluralism. That's a powerful start, Samjhe.
Got it. Let's unpack the body of the answer. You've suggested dividing it into 3 parts. The first is cultural syncretism.
Bilkul. Yahan, you need to explain how Christian theology assimilated local traditions. It's about the indigenization of rituals and symbolism. This is the heart of the unique identity. You need to show, not just tell.
ठीक है, that makes sense. So my next question is, to support the point on syncretism, what are the absolute best examples to use that are short, memorable, and powerful?
What's fascinating here is the variety. Quick answer.
Yeah.
Give at least 2 very specific examples. First, rituals, like using the Nilavilakkoo and floral decorations, similar to Hindu customs.
Okay.
Second, practices, like removing shoes before entering the church. But the masterstroke is mentioning the Mar Thoma cross.
Mar Thoma cross, what's that?
It depicts the cross on a lotus, a powerful symbol in Indian traditions. It visually represents the synthesis of Christian and Indian symbolism.
Wow, that's a brilliant example. Moving to the second part of the body, social stratification and caste. ये थोड़ा complex topic है.
It is, but it's crucial for a complete answer. Yahan you must explain their status within Kerala's traditional caste hierarchy. Unlike the, Western egalitarian model of Christianity, this community historically occupied a middle-tier status. They often aligned with upper caste Hindus in terms of ritual purity and social standing.
This raises a very important question. I see Radcliffe Brown mentioned in the notes. Why is it necessary to mention a scholar like Radcliffe Brown here? What value does it add?
That's a high-level thinking question. Quick answer. Mentioning his theory of structural functionalism adds a strong anthropological angle to your answer. It shows you can link theory to a practical example.
Okay, so how would you phrase that?
You can say that from a Radcliffe Brown perspective, their integration of Hindu social elements like caste analogues was a mechanism, a mechanism that ensured structural stability and social cohesion for the community within the broader non-Christian society of Kerala. It was a functional adaptation. समझे?
Superb. That really elevates the answer. And the final part of the body is kinship and marriage.
Yes. यहाँ उनके marriage rules and family structure के बारे में बताओ. Marriage is traditionally endogamous. मतलब it's confined within the community.
To maintain social purity and cultural continuity.
Exactly. Their kinship system often mirrors local Hindu traditions with patrilineal norms where male inheritance is dominant.
Okay, but this section includes a sensitive topic, dowry. So my last question for this section, how should a student present a sensitive topic like dowry in an answer without sounding judgmental?
A very practical question for answer writing. Quick answer. Present it as an anthropological observation. Show how strong regional cultural norms, like dowry, can sometimes prevail over religious teachings.
So focus on the analysis, not the morality.
Correct. You should state that despite Christian doctrines opposing it, the dowry system persists, reflecting the deep-rooted influence of regional culture on the community's social practices. Focus on the analysis, not the judgment.
Perfect. Now for the conclusion. How do we tie this all together for a perfect finish?
The conclusion should be a powerful summary. For this specific topic, there is a famous and very effective summary statement. Hindu in culture, Christian in religion, and Oriental in worship.
Wow.
ये quote पूरे answer को perfectly summarizes their dual identity and leaves a lasting impression on the examiner.
Awesome. Now pause and practice saying this structure out loud. Dost, rehearse the key terms. Syncretism, Nilavilakku, Marth homocross, endogamy, structural functionalism. Practice karo.
In short, the Syro-Malabar Christians are a perfect example of how Indian culture can blend with a global faith, challenging simple definitions of religious identity and showcasing India's deep-rooted pluralism.
Chalo aage badhte hain. Next up is a really important topic from the sources. Explain the constitutional, legislative, and policy measures protecting linguistic minorities. 15M.
Right.
The broad micro theme for this is the legal and administrative framework preserving India's linguistic pluralism amidst diversity.
बहुत important topic है ये. According to the 2011 census, India has 122 major languages and more than 1,600 dialects.
1,600. That's a huge number.
It is. So you can imagine this scale. A linguistic minority is basically a group of people whose mother tongue is different from the official language of the state they live in.
Here's a micro story to make it real for everyone. Imagine एक family तमिलनाडु से पंजाब मूव करती है. उनके बच्चों को प्राइमरी स्कूल में तमिल में एजुकेशन रिसीव करने की फैसिलिटी मिलना, that is their constitutional right.
Yes, that's Article 350A.
It's not a favor, dost. It's a fundamental right.
Correct. Now, let's get into the answer structure. For the introduction, you must start with the Census 2011 data to show the massive scale of linguistic diversity. Then, state that protecting these minorities is crucial for upholding the national ideal of unity in diversity.
Okay, my first question on this. What's the main advantage of using data in the introduction for a question like this?
It's about credibility. Quick answer. Data, like 122 major languages, immediately gives your argument weight and credibility. It tells the examiner that you understand the context and the magnitude of the issue you're about to discuss.
Got it. अब body पर चलते हैं. Let's divide it into three parts. First, constitutional safeguards.
बिल्कुल. यहाँ you have to be very specific. Mentioning the exact articles is non-negotiable. This is the foundation of your answer.
ठीक है, but memorizing all the articles can be tough. So my next question, which are the top 3 most important articles that a student absolutely must
You
mention?
need to prioritize. Quick answer, Article 29.
Which gives the right to conserve language and culture.
Yes. Then Article 350A, which provides for instruction in the mother tongue, the primary stage.
Okay.
And Article 350B, which provides for a special officer for linguistic minorities. These three form the holy trinity of linguistic safeguards. इन्हें जरूर लिखना.
All right. The next part of the body is the legislative and policy framework.
Yes. यहाँ पर laws and policies आती हैं. For example, the 8th schedule of the Constitution, which recognizes 22 languages, and very importantly, the 3-language formula from 1968.
And the new National Education Policy, NEP 2020.
Right.
This brings me to my third question. How can a student effectively connect the old 3-language formula with the new NEP 2020 in their answer?
Good question. If we connect this to the bigger picture, quick answer. Explain that the 3-language formula from 1968 was a foundational policy. NEP 2020 reaffirms and strengthens that original idea, especially by putting a renewed and stronger focus on mother tongue education at the primary level.
So NEP is an evolution of that idea.
Exactly. It's an evolution, not a revolution, in this context.
Okay. और body का आखिरी part. Challenges and issues. सिर्फ provisions बताना काफी नहीं है, right?
Exactly. A critical analysis always fetches more marks. You must mention challenges like implementation gaps, the problem of endangered languages, and regional agitations based on language.
So, to make the section feel real and not just theoretical, my fourth question is, what are the best real-world examples to use for these challenges?
Quick answer. Use specific, well-known examples. For the conflict over language, mention the Dravidian movement in Tamil Nadu against Hindi imposition.
Classic example.
For endangered languages, you can name Tulu or Gondi. And for regional agitations fueled by linguistic identity, the Gorkhaland movement is a classic case study.
Perfect. अब आते हैं conclusion पर. How can we make the conclusion memorable?
The key is to connect your answer to a larger concept. Quick answer. Link the protection of linguistic minorities to the broader concept of Indian federalism.
How so?
You can say something like, these safeguards are not just about protecting languages, they are vital for the health, stability, and cooperative spirit of Indian federalism. If you happen to remember a quote from Granville Austin on this, that would be a powerful ending.
Great advice. Ab dost, pause the video and practice saying Article 29 protects culture, Article 350A supports mother tongue education. Rehearse this connection. Practice karo.
In short, India has a robust constitutional and policy framework for linguistic minorities, but the key challenge lies in its effective implementation on the ground.
Next question. ये 2021 से है. Discuss the constitutional safeguards for religious minorities in India. 15 marks. The micro theme here is the constitutional framework ensuring religious pluralism, equality, and cultural preservation in a secular state.
सबसे पहले ये क्लियर करना जरूरी है कि the Constitution of India does not define the word minority.
Really? It's not defined.
No. The National Commission for Minorities Act 1992 has identified 6 communities as national minorities: Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, and Parsis. This is a crucial starting point.
इसको भी एक real life example से समझते हैं. Think about St. Stephen's College in Delhi.
Perfect example.
It's a minority institution. Article 30 of the Constitution gives them the right to establish and administer their own educational institutions, allowing them to preserve their community's cultural and religious values. This isn't just theory. It has a real-world impact on institutions we all know.
A perfect example. Now for the answer structure. Let's start with the introduction. You should begin by explaining that the term minority is not defined in the Constitution. Then you must mention the TMA Pai Foundation case of 2002.
TMA Pai.
Yes, where the Supreme Court clarified that minorities should be identified at the state level, not the national level.
Okay, that's a very specific legal point. So my first question is, why is mentioning the TMA Pai case so important in this answer?
It's important because it shows depth.
Quick answer. Mentioning this case gives your answer a strong legal and authoritative foundation. It shows the examiner that you haven't just memorized the articles, but you also understand their judicial interpretation.
It elevates the answer from good to great.
Exactly. Cool. अब आते हैं body पर. Let's break it down into 4 clear sections. The first is fundamental rights.
Yes, the big ones. यहाँ आते हैं Articles 14 and 15, which guarantee equality and prohibit discrimination, and Articles 25 to 28, which guarantee the freedom of religion to all citizens.
Let's get into the details here. A common point of confusion is between Article 25 and 26. So my next question, how can a student explain the subtle but crucial difference between Article 25 and Article 26?
What's fascinating here is the distinction. Quick answer. Article 25 guarantees the freedom of religion to individuals. It's about a person's right to profess, practice, and propagate their religion.
Individual freedom.
In contrast, Article 26 guarantees these rights to religious denominations or groups. It's about a collective's right to manage its own affairs in matters of religion. So, Article 25 is for a person, Article 26 is for a group. ये clarity important है.
Great distinction. The next section in the body. Cultural and educational rights. ये सबसे critical section लगता है.
बिल्कुल. This is where the most specific safeguards are. This section is all about Article 29 and Article 30, which are considered the heart of minority rights in India.
Right to conserve culture and right to establish institutions.
Correct. Article 29 protects the interests of minorities in conserving their culture and language, and Article 30 provides the right to establish and administer their educational institutions.
हमने St. Stephen's का example लिया था. So my third question, to highlight the significance of Article 30, what other powerful examples can be used?
You can add more weight. Quick answer. Besides St. Stephen's College, mentioning Jamia Millia Islamia is another excellent and concrete example. These are prominent national institutions that exist because of the protection granted by Article 30.
Okay. The third section is directive principles and other provisions.
Correct. Yahan you can mention Article 46, which is a DPSP. It directs the state to promote the educational and economic interests of weaker sections. And interestingly, you can also mention Articles 350A-B here.
Wait, that's a bit confusing. My fourth question, Articles 350A, B are for linguistic minorities. Why should we mention them in an answer about religious minorities?
This is an analytical masterstroke. Quick answer. You mention it to show that linguistic and religious identities often overlap.
Ah, okay.
For example, a large number of Urdu speakers in India are Muslims. By mentioning these articles, you demonstrate a deeper, more nuanced understanding of how different identities intersect. It shows your analytical ability.
Smart. Or आखिरी section of the body.
Statutory and institutional mechanisms.
Yes. यहाँ laws and bodies, जैसे the National Commission for Minorities Act of 1992 or the exemptions for minority institutions under the RTE Act of 2009 का जिक्र करो. It shows you know the complete picture, from the constitution to the statutes and institutions that enforce these rights. Finally, the conclusion. How do you write a balanced conclusion for a topic like this?
Balance is E. Quick answer. Start by stating that the Indian constitutional framework for minorities is one of the most robust in the world. But then, you must also acknowledge the persisting challenges, like ineffective implementation and rising communal polarization.
And for a final punch,
For a powerful ending, you can use the Supreme Court's famous quote, "The protection of minorities is the hallmark of a civilized nation."
brilliant. सोच लो इसके बारे में दोस्त. Pause and try to categorize the safeguards in a table format. Protective, religious, cultural, and developmental. Rehearse this categorization.
In short, the Indian Constitution offers a comprehensive, multi-layered protection mechanism for religious minorities, blending fundamental rights with specific cultural safeguards and institutional support.
अगला क्वेश्चन 2020 से है और ये थोड़ा क्रिटिकल है. What are the social and political problems of religious minorities in India?
20M.
Yes, the micro theme here is the gap between constitutional safeguards and the socio-political reality of religious minorities in India.
बिल्कुल. ये क्वेश्चन व्हाट इज रिटन इन द लॉ से व्हाट इज हैपनिंग ऑन द ग्राउंड पर शिफ्ट करता है. यहाँ रियलिटी चेक करना है. अब हम सेफगार्ड्स की बात नहीं, उनके ऑन ग्राउंड चैलेंजेस की बात करेंगे. द फोकस शिफ्ट्स फ्रॉम प्रोविजंस टू प्रॉब्लम्स.
Here's where it gets really interesting. एक micro story सोचो. Sociologist Syed Ali study showed that in many Indian cities, it's extremely difficult for Muslims to get a house on rent in mixed locality neighborhoods.
Yes, I've read about this.
This forces them to live in segregated areas, a phenomenon called ghettoization. This is a real, tangible social problem.
Exactly, a perfect example of a systemic issue. Let's design the answer. For the introduction, you should acknowledge that while constitutional guarantees exist, minorities still face multifaceted challenges. Use strong keywords like historical communalism and majoritarian politics to set a critical tone right from the start.
This raises an important question about presentation. My first question, how should the tone of this answer be different from the previous answers about safeguards?
Yes, the tone is everything here. Quick answer. The tone must be analytical and critical. You are not just listing problems. You have to connect them to their root causes, like historical prejudices and contemporary majoritarian politics.
So, connecting the dots.
Yes, showing the why behind the what.
Got it. अब body को दो हिस्सों में तोड़ते हैं. Social problems और political problems. Let's start with social problems.
Under social problems, you can discuss 3 key points. First, discrimination and marginalization, using the housing example and Syed Ali's work. Second, educational and economic disparities. Yahan, the Sacha Committee report from 2006 is your most powerful weapon.
The Sacha Committee report, right?
Mention its finding that only 4% of Muslims are graduates. It's a shocking statistic. Third is communal violence and hate crimes.
Okay, let's zoom in on this. My second question. What is the best way to integrate scholars and reports like the Sacha Committee into the answer to make it more credible?
It's about building evidence-based arguments. Quick answer. State your point first and then immediately back it up with the evidence. For example, minorities face significant economic backwardness, a fact powerfully highlighted by the Sacha Committee report, which found that this structure is very convincing.
And what about case studies? You mentioned communal violence. So my third question, what specific value does using a case study add to an answer?
It adds a human element. Quick answer. A case study, for instance, the Akhlaq lynching case over beef rumors, makes an abstract point like hate crimes concrete, emotional, and memorable for the examiner.
It moves from a statistic to a human story.
Precisely. Mentioning the Gujarat riots of 2002 or the Delhi riots of 2020 also anchors the point in historical reality.
ठीक है. अब दूसरे पार्ट पर चलते हैं. Political problems.
यहाँ भी 3 key points हैं. First, underrepresentation and tokenism. यहाँ you can explain scholar Zoya Hassan's concept of tokenism.
What is tokenism simply put?
It's placing a few minority members in visible but ultimately powerless positions.
Okay.
Second, vote bank politics. यहाँ scholar Paul Brass का concept बहुत useful है. He explains how minorities are often treated as a monolithic vote bank without their real development issues being addressed.
And the third point.
Third is institutional weakness. For example, mentioning Harsh Mandar's critique of the limited powers of the National Commission for Minorities.
This is a very structured way to put it. My fourth question, what is the most logical flow to structure the section on political problems?
A logical flow is crucial. Quick answer. Start with the effect, which is underrepresentation. Then explain the cause, which is vote bank politics. And finally, analyze the failure of the intended solution, which is institutional weakness.
Effect, cause, failed solution. I like that.
It's a very compelling structure.
Brilliant. Or the conclusion. How can we make the conclusion forward-looking and not just a grim summary?
A good conclusion should suggest a way forward. Quick answer. You can use a quote from a scholar like Rajiv Bhargava about the gap between constitutional ideals and reality. And then suggest a positive way forward, like shifting the focus from protectionism towards empowerment through education and economic development.
So ending on a constructive note.
Exactly. It shows you're not just a critic, but also a constructive thinker.
This is a heavy topic. Pause, dost. And trace this cycle in your mind. Majoritarian politics can lead to ghettoization, which can lead to poverty, which can make a community vulnerable to tokenism. See the cycle. Rehearse connecting these ideas.
In short, despite strong constitutional safeguards, religious minorities in India face deep-rooted social and political problems that often create a vicious cycle of marginalization and exclusion.
हम फिर से linguistic minorities पर आगे हैं. ये 2020 से एक short note है. Linguistic minorities in India, 10M.
Yes.
The micro theme is the constitutional status, safeguards, and socio-political dynamics of groups whose mother tongue differs from the regional majority.
Yes, but ये question पहले वाले से थोड़ा अलग है. वहाँ the focus was on measures, but यहाँ the focus is more on dynamics and conflicts. It's more analytical and less descriptive. और ये 10 mark का है, so you have to be very concise and to the point.
इसका एक example है the Sons of the Soil movement.
Yes.
है ना? जैसे मुंबई में there is sometimes friction between the Marathi-speaking population and non-Marathi speakers over jobs and resources.
ये एक regional dynamic है, बिल्कुल. So that's what we need to focus on. For the introduction of a short note, you need to be brief. Define linguistic minorities, use the census 2011 data, and mention the 22 languages in the 8th schedule. Get straight to the point.
So for a short note, my first question is, what should a student absolutely avoid in the introduction?
Time and space are limited. Quick answer. Avoid long historical backgrounds or philosophical introductions. Get straight to the definition and key statistics to save space and time. No need for a long build-up.
Okay, for the body, let's divide it into 3 small sections. First, constitutional safeguards.
Yes, but here you must be brief. Briefly mention Articles 29, 30, and 350B. To add extra value in a short note, you can link a scholar's name to an article. For example, linking Paul Brass's work on language politics to the context of these articles.
That seems tough to remember. My second question. How can a student remember which scholar to link with which concept?
You don't need to be a memory champion. Quick answer. Don't try to memorize everything. Just create 1 or 2 strong associations. For example, just remember, Paul Brass equals language politics.
Simple.
This simple association will help you recall it during the exam and give your answer an academic depth that others might miss.
ठीक है. The second and most important part of the body is regional dynamics and conflicts.
Yes, this is the core of this particular answer. Yahan, you must use case studies. For the politicization of language, mention Paul Brass's argument and the case of Bengali speakers in Assam. For urban Sons of the Soil movements, you can mention Andre Betel's perspective and the case of non-Marathi speakers in Mumbai.
And for border regions?
For border region vulnerability, you can mention M.N. Srinivas's observations on the issues faced by Manipuri people in Assam.
That's a lot of case studies. This leads to my third question. In a short note, how many case studies should one choose to include?
Variety is the key. Quick answer, 1 solid case study for each subpoint is enough. But try to show geographical variety in your examples. एक northeast से, एक urban center से, एक North India से. This shows a broad all-India understanding.
And the last part of the body is challenges.
Yes, very briefly mention the implementation gap and the shortage of teachers and textbooks for education in mother tongues.
So, my fourth question is, how can these challenges be presented effectively and concisely?
Quick answer, use bullet points for clarity and brevity. For example, 1. Education deficit. 2. Implementation gap. Simple, direct, and effective.
Or, conclusion. My last question. Can a student add a new point in the conclusion of a short note?
Absolutely not. That's a common mistake. Quick answer, no. The conclusion should only summarize the main arguments made in the body. You can end with a strong statement about the importance of strengthening the 3-language formula.
Good strategy. Chalo dosto, practicing. Paul Brass connects language to ethnic politics, while Andre Betel highlights urban Sons of the Soil tensions. Rehearse these scholar concept connections.
In short, while constitutionally protected, linguistic minorities in India face significant socio-political challenges arising from regional politics, ethnic tensions, and gaps in policy implementation.
और अब हमारा आखिरी question 2015 से है, discuss the problems faced by religious minorities in India. 15M. The micro theme is the socio-economic and political hurdles faced by India's 6 recognized religious minorities despite constitutional guarantees.
ये question 2020 वाले से काफी similar लगता है, but we can structure it differently to provide a more nuanced answer. The key is to show a different analytical approach. We can focus on different dimensions of the problem.
Let's take the example of anti-conversion laws in some states. While they are officially meant to stop forced conversions, many minority groups feel that these laws are sometimes used to target them and restrict their freedom of religion under Article 25.
Yes, that's a key point. That's a specific legal hurdle. Let's structure this answer using a multidimensional approach. For the introduction, start with data from the 2011 census. Minorities constitute about 19.3% of the population. State that despite constitutional guarantees, they face systemic and structural challenges.
Okay, so the big question here is differentiation. My first question, how can a student make this answer look different from the 2020 answer?
It's all in the structure. Quick answer. In the 2020 answer, we made a clear division between social and political problems. Here, we can break down the problem into more dimensions: social, economic, political, and a separate, very important fourth category, cultural and gender dimensions.
A multi-dimensional structure. I like it.
It makes the answer more detailed and sophisticated.
Let's unpack the body then. First dimension, social marginalization and insecurity.
यहाँ 3 सब points हैं. First, discrimination and ghettoization. Second, communal violence, mentioning historical events like the Gujarat and Delhi riots. And third, the rise of majoritarianism, which contributes to an environment of fear.
How can the section be made more impactful? My second question. What kind of vocabulary should be used to convey the seriousness of these issues?
Through your choice of words. Quick answer. Use strong and precise keywords like systemic stereotyping, creation of segregated enclaves, organized violence, and a pervasive environment of fear. These words convey the intensity of the problem effectively.
Got it. Second dimension, economic and educational deprivation.
यहाँ 2 key points हैं. First, lagging indicators in income, employment, and access to credit. And second, educational backwardness, where we can again use the powerful data from the Sachar Committee report.
ये सचार कमेटी रिपोर्ट बार-बार आ रहा है. So, my third question is it okay to quote the Sachar Committee report repeatedly in different answers?
बिल्कुल. In fact, you must.
Quick answer. It is the most authoritative and comprehensive government commission report on this topic. Repeating it shows that you know the key evidence and are grounding your answer in solid data, not just opinions.
Okay, third dimension, political and legal problems.
यहाँ 3 points cover करने हैं. First, political underrepresentation, low number of Muslim MPs in the Lok Sabha. Second, legal hurdles like the anti-conversion laws example. And third, implementation gaps in getting recognition or aid for minority institutions.
And the final, new dimension you suggested, cultural and gender dimensions.
Yes, this adds a unique and very important touch to your answer. First, threats to cultural identity, especially for smaller minorities like the Parsis. And second, the concept of intersectional discrimination. This sounds complex. My fourth question, how can a student explain a complex term like intersectional discrimination in a simple way?
It's simpler than it sounds. Quick answer. Explain it as facing discrimination on 2 or more fronts at the same time. For example, a woman from a religious minority faces discrimination first for being a woman and second for being from that minority community.
So, double discrimination.
Exactly. The controversy around the practice of triple talaq is a good example, where gender and religious identity intersected.
That's a crystal clear explanation. Finally, the conclusion. My fifth question. How can one provide a practical, solution-oriented conclusion for this answer?
It's about showing a way forward.
Quick answer. After summarizing the problems as structural, you can mention specific government initiatives aimed at solving them, like the Prime Minister's 15-point program. You can also suggest the need for strengthening institutions like the National Commission for Minorities.
So, a constructive and hopeful end.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic breakdown.
आखिरी बार दोस्त, pause and imagine. This multi-dimensional structure, social dimension, economic dimension, political dimension, and the crucial legal and gender dimension. ये structure याद रखना. Practice this multi-dimensional thinking.
In short, the problems faced by religious minorities in India are multidimensional, spanning from social insecurity and economic backwardness to political underrepresentation and legal challenges that require systemic and multi-pronged solutions.
Phew. That was a truly deep analysis. बहुत कुछ cover किया हमने आज.
Let's do a quick, energetic recap. We have explored the critical aspects of India's social fabric. First, through the Syro-Malabar Christians, we saw the theme of a community exemplifying religious syncretism.
Right.
Then we understood the safeguards for linguistic and religious minorities. The theme there was the legal framework preserving pluralism.
Got it. Safeguards.
And finally, we critically examined the problems they face, exploring the theme of the gap between constitutional safeguards and socio-political reality.
बिल्कुल. Today's session was not just about facts, it was about understanding different perspectives. अब आपके लिए एक final thought. हमने safeguards और problems की बात की. थोड़ा सोच लो, to bridge the gap between these two, what can we do as individual citizens? What is our personal role in strengthening India's unity and diversity?
एक बहुत जरूरी सवाल है, इस पर सोचना जरूर.
तो दोस्तों, that's all for today's super detailed discussion. अगर आपको ये knowledge pack session पसंद आया तो प्लीज हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें, इस सेशन को लाइक करें और कमेंट्स में बताएं कि आप आगे कौन से टॉपिक्स पर ऐसी ही गहरी चर्चा चाहते हैं. मिलते हैं अगले सेशन में. Keep learning and keep questioning.